Most people obsess over their first $1 million while completely missing the three passive income milestones that actually transform how you live day to day. You could have seven figures in the bank and still feel broke if your money isn't generating the right kind of cash flow. Meanwhile, someone with a fraction of that amount might be living with zero financial stress because they hit these specific thresholds. Here's what nobody tells you about passive income. The number in your investment account matters far less than the monthly cash it produces. You can have $800,000 saved and feel trapped in your job because it's all locked up in retirement accounts you can't touch. Or you could have $200,000 strategically positioned to generate monthly income that covers your essentials, giving you a freedom most millionaires never experience. The average American believes they need at least $2 million to retire comfortably. Some think they need $5 million or more. But there are people right now living better lives than most high earners, and they're doing it by hitting three specific passive income milestones that nobody talks about. These aren't arbitrary numbers someone made up to sell you a course. These are psychological and practical thresholds that fundamentally change your relationship with work, risk, and life decisions. The first milestone is generating $1,000 per month in passive income. That might sound modest, but let's talk about what this actually does to your brain. When you know that $1,000 is coming in whether you work or not, something shifts. You're not financially independent yet, but you've proven to yourself that money can work for you instead of the other way around. That $1,000 covers your food, or your car payment, or your utilities. It's one major expense category that's now handled without you lifting a finger. Think about how most people approach their finances. They trade time for money, spend that money, and repeat the cycle until they're 65. The hamster wheel doesn't stop until they're too old to enjoy the freedom they've been chasing. But $1,000 in monthly passive income breaks the pattern. You've created a small crack in the system. Getting to this milestone requires roughly $200,000 invested in dividend-paying stocks or index funds yielding around 6% annually. Or $150,000 if you're comfortable with slightly higher yield investments. For someone starting from zero, this feels impossible. But here's what changes everything about how you think. You're not saving for a number anymore. You're building an income stream. When you shift from thinking about net worth to thinking about monthly cash flow, your entire strategy changes. You stop caring about whether your portfolio went up 2% this month. You start caring about whether your dividend payments increased. You stop comparing yourself to people with bigger account balances. You start comparing your passive income to your monthly expenses. The second milestone hits different. We're talking about $3,000 per month in passive income. This is where financial stress starts evaporating from your life. Not completely, but significantly. For most people, $3,000 covers housing, transportation, and food. The big three expenses that consume the majority of everyone's paycheck. Reaching this level means you've accumulated somewhere between $600,000 and $750,000 in income-generating investments, depending on your strategy and risk tolerance. This isn't retirement money locked away in accounts you can't access until you're old. This is working capital producing monthly cash flow right now. Here's where this milestone changes everything. You're no longer desperate. That job you hate, you could probably survive without it if you had to. That toxic client who treats you like garbage, you can afford to fire them. That business idea you've been thinking about for years, you now have the financial cushion to actually try it. The psychology of this cannot be overstated. When you're not operating from desperation, you make completely different decisions. You negotiate better because you're willing to walk away. You take smarter risks because you have a foundation supporting you. You stop accepting situations that make you miserable because you have options. Most people never experience this level of security because they're too busy spending money to look wealthy instead of actually building wealth. They upgrade their lifestyle every time they get a raise. They finance cars they can't afford. They buy houses at the top of their budget, all while the truly wealthy are quietly building income streams that will eventually make work optional. But there's a third milestone that changes the game completely: $10,000 per month in passive income. This is where you cross into genuine financial independence for most people. Not everyone, but most. Unless you're living in Manhattan or San Francisco with an expensive lifestyle, $10,000 per month covers everything. Housing, food, transportation, insurance, entertainment, travel, everything. Getting here requires approximately $2 million to $2.5 million in strategic investments. Before you dismiss that as impossible, understand something crucial. The path to the first milestone teaches you how to reach the second, and the second milestone accelerates your journey to the third. This isn't linear growth, it's exponential. When you have $200,000 generating $1,000 monthly, you're learning the systems. You're developing the discipline. You're proving the concept works. When you reach $600,000 generating $3,000 monthly, your investments are compounding faster. You're making fewer financial mistakes. You're optimizing for cash flow instead of just accumulation. And here's what makes the third milestone so powerful. Once you hit $10,000 in monthly passive income, work becomes completely optional, not in some distant retirement fantasy. Right now, today, you're not postponing your life until you're 65 and hoping you're still healthy enough to enjoy it. You're living it now, while you still have the energy and time to do everything you've been putting off. This is where we need to talk about what actually gets you to each milestone, because most people are using strategies that will never work. The first strategy most people try is working harder at their job, hoping for raises and promotions. This is the slowest possible path to passive income, because you're still trading time for money. Even if you double your salary, you're not building systems that generate cash flow while you sleep. You're just earning more money that you'll probably spend on a bigger house and a nicer car, keeping you trapped in the same cycle at a higher income level. The wealthy understand something fundamental that breaks this pattern entirely. They focus on acquiring assets that produce income independent of their labor, real estate that generates rental income, dividend-paying stocks that send checks quarterly, businesses that operate with or without their direct involvement. These aren't get-rich-quick schemes. They're mathematical certainties that compound over time. Let's start with the most accessible path for reaching that first $1,000 monthly milestone: dividend investing through index funds. You don't need to pick individual stocks or understand complex financial instruments. You need a brokerage account and the discipline to consistently invest money you won't touch for years. The math is straightforward. If you want $1,000 monthly from dividends and you're targeting a 6% annual yield, you need approximately $200,000 invested. That might sound impossible, but watch what happens when you break it down. Saving $500 monthly for 20 years at 8% average returns gets you there. Increase that to $800 monthly, and you arrive in 13 years. Find a way to invest $1,500 monthly, and you're looking at under 8 years. The timeline compresses dramatically as your contribution rate increases, which is why cutting expenses matters so much more than most people realize. Every unnecessary subscription, every impulse purchase, every dollar spent trying to impress people who don't care is time added to your sentence of mandatory employment. Real estate offers a different path with unique advantages. Purchase a property for $200,000 with a 20% down payment. Your initial investment is $40,000. If that property rents for $1,800 monthly and your mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance total $1,300, you're cash flowing $500 monthly. That's a 15% annual return on your actual cash invested, not the property's total value. Do this twice, and you've hit your first milestone with $80,000 invested instead of $200,000. The objection everyone raises is that real estate requires active management. True, but only if you manage it yourself. Property management companies typically charge 8 to 10% of monthly rent to handle everything. On that $1,800 monthly rent, you'd pay around $150 for management. Your cash flow drops to $350 monthly, but you're still generating passive income at a 10.5% annual return on invested capital. That beats most stock portfolios, and you're leveraging the bank's money to multiply your returns. Business ownership takes this concept to another level entirely. Not starting a business where you're the key employee working 80-hour weeks. Building or buying businesses that operate through systems and other people's labor. This is how the truly wealthy operate. They own equity in enterprises that generate profit regardless of their personal time investment. A small service business generating $50,000 in annual profit that you purchase for $150,000 gives you a 33% return. Buy 3 of these and you're at $12,500 monthly. That's financial independence for most people. The challenge with business ownership is that it requires either significant capital to purchase existing businesses or expertise to build them from scratch. But here's what changes as you climb from one milestone to the next. That first $1,000 monthly gives you breathing room to take smarter risks. You can invest time learning business acquisition strategies because you're not panicking about next month's rent. The second milestone at $3,000 monthly provides enough security that you could potentially quit your job to focus full-time on scaling to the third milestone. This is the compounding effect that most people completely miss. Your first $200,000 is the hardest money you'll ever accumulate because you're starting from zero with nothing working in your favor. But once you have $200,000 generating returns, reaching $400,000 becomes easier because your money is now helping you save. At $600,000, the acceleration becomes obvious. Your investments might be generating $3,000 to $5,000 monthly, which you can reinvest to reach the next milestone faster than you reached the previous one. The people who never reach financial independence make one critical mistake repeatedly. They increase their spending to match their income growth. They get a raise and immediately upgrade their lifestyle. They finally save $50,000 and use it as a down payment on a luxury car instead of an income-producing asset. They treat money as something to spend rather than something to deploy strategically. Every dollar has a job. It can either make your life slightly more comfortable today, or it can work to make you permanently free tomorrow. Most people choose comfort, then wonder why they're still working in their 60s. The fastest path to each milestone is combining multiple strategies simultaneously. Maximize your income through career advancement while minimizing expenses through intentional living. Invest aggressively in dividend-producing index funds while saving for real estate down payments. Build side businesses that could eventually replace your primary income. This multi-pronged approach creates redundancy in your passive income streams, making your financial independence more stable and achievable faster than focusing on any single method. What separates the people who actually achieve these milestones from those who just dream about them comes down to one factor. They started before they felt ready. They bought their first rental property while still nervous about being a landlord. They invested their first $10,000 when they barely understood the stock market. They launched businesses before having all the answers. Perfection is the enemy of progress, and waiting until you have everything figured out guarantees you'll never begin. The difference between dreaming about these milestones and actually hitting them isn't intelligence or luck. It's tolerating discomfort long enough for compound growth to take over. You'll feel stupid buying your first index fund shares when you barely understand what an expense ratio means. You'll feel exposed signing paperwork for a rental property when you've never fixed a leaky faucet. You'll feel like an imposter launching a business when competitors seem more qualified. That feeling of inadequacy is actually confirmation you're doing something right. Comfort is the graveyard of financial progress. Consider what happens if you never start. 20 years from now, you'll still be working the same job or one similar to it. You'll still be checking your bank account before making purchases. You'll still be one emergency away from financial disaster. The only difference is you'll be 20 years older with 20 fewer years to fix the situation. Time doesn't care about your hesitation. It compounds whether you're using it or wasting it. Now let's address the elephant that's been lurking this entire time. What if you fail? What if you invest in dividend stocks and the market crashes? What if you buy rental property and can't find tenants? What if you start a business and it goes nowhere? These aren't hypothetical concerns. They're statistical certainties that will happen to some degree as you pursue financial independence. The question isn't whether you'll face setbacks. The question is whether setbacks will stop you or teach you. Here's what separates people who eventually succeed from those who give up after the first obstacle. They treat failures as expensive education rather than personal deficiencies. Your first rental property might lose money for 6 months while you figure out tenant screening. That's not failure. That's the tuition you pay to become a competent landlord. Your first business attempt might generate zero revenue. That's not wasted time. That's learning what doesn't work, so your second attempt has higher odds. The wealthy aren't wealthy because they never failed. They're wealthy because they failed faster and cheaper than everyone else, then applied those lessons to their next attempt. Every successful real estate investor has stories about nightmare tenants. Every profitable business owner has tales of products that bombed. Every dividend portfolio that now generates thousands monthly started with someone nervously buying their first $100 of stock while second-guessing everything. You need a different relationship with failure if you're serious about these milestones. Stop viewing it as evidence you're not cut out for this. Start viewing it as confirmation you're actually trying instead of just researching endlessly. The person who loses money on their first investment is infinitely closer to financial independence than the person who spent 5 years reading about investing but never bought anything. Here's something nobody mentions about reaching these passive income milestones. Your life will change in ways you didn't predict. When you hit that first $1,000 monthly, suddenly job interviews feel different because you're not desperate. You negotiate harder because walking away doesn't terrify you. When you reach 3,000 monthly, you start noticing opportunities you previously couldn't consider because you were too busy surviving. Maybe you've always wanted to take 3 months to learn a new skill. Now you can afford to do it without income. When you hit 5,000 monthly, your entire decision-making framework transforms. You're no longer choosing between options based on which pays more. You're choosing based on which aligns with how you want to spend your finite time on this planet. This is the part where most financial content would tell you to start small, be patient, and trust the process. That advice isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. Yes, start small because you have to start somewhere. But don't confuse starting small with thinking small. Your first $100 invested should be treated with the same strategic intention as your first 100,000. The habits you build managing a $1,000 portfolio are the same habits that will manage a $1,000,000 portfolio. Discipline doesn't suddenly appear when the numbers get bigger. It scales from the foundation you build today. The timeline to reach each milestone varies dramatically based on your starting point and aggression level. Someone earning $40,000 annually who saves 20% will take longer than someone earning $80,000 saving the same percentage. But here's what matters more than the timeline. Direction beats speed every single time. Moving slowly toward financial independence is infinitely better than moving quickly toward nowhere. The person saving 200 monthly is lapping everyone who's saving zero, regardless of how much those other people earn. You're probably wondering what happens after you reach that third milestone of 5,000 monthly in passive income. Do you stop? Do you keep building? The answer depends entirely on what you want your life to look like. Some people hit 5,000 monthly and declare victory because it covers their lifestyle perfectly. They shift focus to non-financial pursuits, knowing their money situation is handled. Others use that 5,000 as a foundation to take bigger swings. They launch businesses they couldn't risk before. They invest in opportunities that require capital and patience. They build toward 8,000 or 10,000 monthly because financial abundance creates options they want to explore. Neither choice is wrong. The point of financial independence isn't to accumulate the highest score. It's to remove money as a limiting factor in how you design your life. Once you've done that, you've won the game regardless of whether you keep playing. The moment you're in right now is the only moment that actually matters. Not the mistakes you've made with money in the past, not the head start someone else got. Right now, with whatever resources you currently have, you can make a decision that moves you closer to or further from these milestones. That decision will compound into hundreds of future decisions that determine whether you're still trading time for money in your 60s or whether you bought your freedom decades earlier. Choose accordingly. The 3 milestones aren't magic numbers pulled from thin air. They're psychological thresholds that rewire how you interact with money, work, and freedom itself. $1,000 monthly proves the concept works. 3,000 monthly eliminates most financial stress. 5,000 monthly makes work optional for the majority of people who aren't drowning in lifestyle inflation. What makes these milestones so powerful isn't the dollar amounts. It's what they represent. Each one gives you permission to make decisions based on what you want, rather than what you can afford. That shift from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking changes everything about how you move through the world. The path isn't complicated. Invest consistently in assets that produce cash flow. Real estate, dividend stocks, businesses that operate without your constant involvement. Avoid the trap of spending every raise. Resist the urge to look wealthy while remaining broke. Build systems that generate income whether you're working or sleeping. Your timeline depends entirely on how aggressively you pursue this and how willing you are to delay gratification. Someone saving 500 monthly will take longer than someone saving 2,000, but both are moving in the right direction while everyone else is financing depreciating assets and wondering why they're still trapped at 60. The people who actually reach these milestones share one characteristic. They started before they felt ready. They invested before they fully understood the stock market. They bought rental properties while still nervous about being landlords. They launched businesses before having all the answers figured out. Perfection is just another word for procrastination, and procrastination is the most expensive mistake you can make with money. You already know what you need to do. The information isn't hidden, the strategies aren't secret. The only question is whether you'll still be researching these concepts 5 years from now, or whether you'll look back at this moment as when you finally started building the passive income that bought your freedom.